My daughter-in-law left for what she called a 10-day business trip to Seattle. 30 minutes after her car disappeared around the corner, my son, who hadn't seen a single ray of light in 3 years, looked straight into my eyes and whispered, "Dad, don't tell her I can see again. We have to leave before she comes back." I dropped my coffee mug. It shattered across the kitchen floor. Neither of us looked down. Before I tell you how my own daughter-in-law convinced an entire hospital that my son would never see again, take a second to like this video, subscribe if you're new here, and tell me where you're watching from tonight. My name is Bennett. I'm 72 years old, a retired homicide detective, and this is the story of the greatest deception I failed to see until my blind son opened his eyes. 3 years before the morning my son looked straight into my eyes again, our family lost far more than his eyesight. My son, Ethan, had spent nearly 15 years designing precision optical equipment for a private medical laboratory outside Savannah. He wasn't the kind of man who rushed through anything. He believed in checklists, safety procedures, and doing every job twice before calling it finished. If anyone had asked me who was least likely to suffer a workplace accident, Ethan would have been the first person I'd name. Then came the explosion. It happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon. The laboratory called me a little after 1 o'clock. They said there had been an equipment failure during a pressure calibration test, and Ethan had been standing closest to the chamber when it exploded. I don't remember driving to Memorial Hospital. I only remember running through those automatic glass doors, praying I wasn't already too late. The surgery lasted nearly 11 hours. I spent the entire night beneath cold fluorescent lights, staring at a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold hours earlier. Every time the operating room doors opened, my heart stopped. Every time another family received news before I did, I wondered if mine would be next. Just after 2 in the morning, the lead ophthalmologist finally walked toward me. His expression told me everything before he spoke. Ethan survived. For one beautiful second, I thought the nightmare was over. Then he continued, "The damage to both optic nerves is severe. We don't believe he'll ever recover his vision. Blind." That single word echoed through my mind for weeks. My son, who loved watching college football every Saturday. My son, who could identify birds just by the colors of their feathers. My son, who never missed a sunrise whenever we went fishing together. He would never see another one again. Throughout those endless days in the hospital, Olivia never left his side. She held Ethan's hand during every examination, thanked every nurse, and spoke to every doctor. With quiet confidence, she cried when they delivered bad news, smiled whenever Ethan needed reassurance, and somehow always knew exactly what to say. If anyone had asked me back then who loved my son more than anyone else in the world, I would have answered without hesitation, my daughter-in-law. When Ethan finally came home 3 weeks later, Olivia quietly took control of every part of his recovery. She organized every prescription, scheduled every appointment, managed every insurance claim. She even labeled each bottle of medication with the exact hour Ethan was supposed to take it. She called it staying organized. I called it devotion. Looking back now, I realize it was something else entirely. The months slowly became years. The specialists stopped talking about recovery and started talking about acceptance, permanent blindness, lifelong adjustment, learning to live in darkness. Olivia always answered before Ethan had the chance. "I'll take care of everything. He gets overwhelmed easily. The stress isn't good for him right now." Little by little, my son stopped asking questions. He slept longer every month. He barely touched his dinner. Some afternoons, he couldn't stay awake long enough to finish watching a single football game with me. Whenever I mentioned how exhausted he seemed, Olivia always gave me the same reassuring smile. "The medication does that, Harold. It's perfectly normal." I believed every word she said. Why wouldn't I? She had every prescription, every medical report, every specialist's phone number, and every answer I didn't have. I was just a 72-year-old retired homicide detective, not an eye surgeon. For 3 long years, I believed blindness was the greatest tragedy that had ever entered our home. I had no idea The real darkness wasn't inside my son's eyes. It was living under the same roof as both of us. The morning Olivia left for her so-called business trip began like every other morning. She kissed Ethan on the forehead, reminded me where his medications were, rolled her cream-colored suitcase across the front porch, and waved as the rideshare disappeared. Around the corner, I stood by the kitchen window until her car vanished from sight. The house felt strangely quiet. It was the first time in years that every room belonged only to my son and me. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. My plan was simple: help Ethan with breakfast, sit with him on the back porch, and spend the afternoon listening to an old Braves game on the radio. Then I heard something. It wasn't the familiar tapping of Ethan's white cane. It wasn't the sound of his bedroom door opening. It was a heavy thud, followed by another, then the scrape of shoes dragging across hardwood floors. Every instinct I had developed during 35 years investigating murders came rushing back. Strange sounds inside a quiet house rarely meant anything good. I hurried down the hallway. "Dad." His voice sounded different, clearer, stronger. I turned the corner. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Ethan was standing, one hand pressed against the hallway wall, the other hanging stiffly at his side. His legs trembled beneath him, but he wasn't reaching for his cane. He was staring directly at me, not past me, not toward the sound of my footsteps. At me. His eyes followed mine with perfect precision. The coffee mug slipped from my hand. It exploded across the hardwood floor. Neither of us looked down. "Dad," he whispered, "don't say anything." I couldn't force a single word out. My son had been blind for 3 years. 3 years. Doctors had shown us scans. Specialists had explained permanent nerve damage. Every expert agreed there was nothing left to save. Yet there he stood, looking straight into my face. "I can see you," he said quietly. "I've been able to see for almost 2 weeks." Every thought inside my head collided at once. How? Why? What changed? Before I could ask a single question, Ethan slowly raised one shaking finger to his lips. "Please, don't tell Olivia." Those words frightened me far more than the fact he could suddenly see again. Why would I hide something like this? I finally asked. His face lost every trace of relief. "Because, if she finds out, she'll finish what she started." The air inside the hallway suddenly felt too heavy to breathe. I stared at my own son, wondering whether I had heard him correctly. "What are you talking about?" He glanced toward the front door, as though he expected Olivia to walk back inside at any second. "We don't have much time." His voice was barely above a whisper. "She isn't helping me recover. She's the reason I stayed blind." Every hair on my arm stood up. For 3 years, I had trusted that woman with my son's life. I had watched her crush pills, prepare eye drops, schedule every appointment, and reassure every doctor that Ethan was following his treatment perfectly. I had thanked her, defended her, praised her. Now my own son was telling me none of it had been real. He reached into the pocket of his sweatpants and pulled out a small plastic bottle. It looked exactly like the prescription eye drops Olivia gave him every night. He held it in the palm of his hand. "I stopped using these 13 days ago." I frowned. "What happened?" He looked directly into my eyes again. My vision started coming back. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence inside that hallway was unlike anything I had experienced in my entire career. I had spent decades looking into the eyes of killers, liars, and grieving families. But nothing had ever prepared me for the moment my own blind son looked straight at me and made me realize that the person we trusted most might have stolen 3 years of his life. I couldn't stop staring at the small bottle resting in Ethan's hand. It looked exactly like every other bottle Olivia had taken from the medicine cabinet for the past 3 years. Same pharmacy label, same blue cap, same dosage instructions. There was nothing unusual about it. "What do you mean, you stopped using it?" I asked. Ethan lowered himself carefully into a dining room chair. His legs were still weak, but his eyes never left mine. "About 2 weeks ago, I accidentally missed a dose." He twisted the bottle slowly between his fingers. "Olivia left early for a doctor's appointment and forgot to remind me. It was the first night in 3 years that I didn't use these drops." He paused. "The next morning, I noticed something strange. My heart pounded against my ribs. I could see light. I frowned. Just light. He nodded. Only light at first. Then shadows. 2 days later, I could make out the outline of the bedroom window. I felt my knees weaken. Why didn't you tell me? He looked down at the bottle. Because I wanted to be sure I wasn't imagining it. For years, every specialist had insisted the damage was permanent. They said hope would only make the disappointment worse. Ethan had spent so long living in darkness that he no longer trusted his own mind. So I stopped taking the drops completely. He looked back at me. Every single day, my vision improved. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then another question struck me. What exactly are those eye drops supposed to be? They're prescribed as anti-inflammatory medication, and you never question them. I did. His answer caught me off guard. I questioned everything. He leaned forward. About 6 months ago, Olivia forgot her tablet on the kitchen counter. She was taking a shower, and a notification popped onto the screen. He swallowed hard. It was an email from someone named Dr. Victor Langford. I didn't recognize the name, but the subject line did. It simply said, "Patient, Ethan Bennett." I opened it. He closed his eyes for a moment, as though replaying every word. It wasn't about treatment. It was about maintaining stability. I felt a cold chill crawl up my spine. What kind of stability? The email said my current condition had to remain unchanged until all insurance documentation was finalized. I stared at him. No doctor would write something like that. I thought the same thing. So I searched his name. Ethan reached into his pocket again. This time, he unfolded a small piece of paper. I copied everything before Olivia came downstairs. The paper contained a handwritten name, an address in Atlanta, and one sentence Ethan had memorized word for word. Continue prescribed regimen. Visual recovery would compromise ongoing claim. The room suddenly felt colder. I read the sentence again. Then again. Visual recovery. Compromise the claim. Those weren't medical instructions. They sounded like financial instructions. Did Olivia know you saw the email? He shook his head. I deleted the notification, locked the tablet, and pretended nothing happened. Why didn't you tell me then? His expression turned painfully calm. Because I didn't know who to trust. He looked toward the front window. Every doctor repeated the same diagnosis. Every nurse followed Olivia's instructions. Every appointment ended exactly the same way. He took a slow breath. I started wondering if everyone was telling the truth, or if everyone had already been convinced I would never see again. I suddenly remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. The original emergency physician. The one who treated Ethan the night of the explosion. He had sounded optimistic. He believed recovery was possible. Yet somehow, within 48 hours, every opinion had changed. At the time, I accepted it as medicine. Now, for the first time, it looked like someone had rewritten my son's future. Ethan leaned closer. "Dad, there is something else." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I know where Olivia keeps the documents she doesn't want anyone to find." I slowly raised my eyes to meet his. "They're not in this house. They're inside a storage unit. And I have a copy of the key." For several seconds, neither of us moved. The only sound inside the house came from the old grandfather clock in the living room. Tick, tick, tick. I looked at the small brass key resting in Ethan's palm. It wasn't much to look at. Just an ordinary storage unit key with a faded blue plastic tag. But something told me that little piece of metal was about to change everything I believed about the last 3 years. "How did you get it?" I asked. Ethan let out a slow breath. "About 4 months ago, Olivia asked me to wait in the car while she picked up some documents. I thought she was going into a bank, but she drove to a self-storage facility instead." He paused. "She forgot to lock the passenger door." I reached into her purse. "I found this key." "You stole it." He slowly nodded. "I made a copy the following week. Then I put the original back before she noticed it was missing." I couldn't decide whether to feel proud or terrified. My son had spent 3 years living in complete darkness. Yet somehow he had managed to uncover secrets the rest of us never questioned. "Does she know?" "No." "And you've never been inside?" "Never." I looked toward the front window. Olivia had only been gone for 40 minutes. According to her itinerary, she'd be attending meetings in Denver for the next 9 days. If Ethan was telling the truth, this was the only chance we'd ever have. "Get your jacket," I said. His eyebrows lifted. "We're going." 20 minutes later, my old pickup truck rolled onto Interstate 16. Neither of us spoke very much during the drive. I kept replaying the past 3 years. Inside my head, every hospital visit, every prescription refill, every reassuring smile Olivia had ever given me. Had all of it been an act? Or was I letting my imagination outrun the facts? Nearly 40 minutes later, we pulled into a quiet storage facility on the eastern edge of Savannah. Rows of identical metal doors stretched across the property like giant gray dominoes. Most of the units were closed. The place was almost silent. Ethan looked around carefully. Unit 214. We found it near the back fence. My hands felt strangely heavy as I slid the duplicate key into the lock. For one terrible second, I hoped it wouldn't fit. Instead, the lock clicked open. I slowly rolled the metal door upward. The sound echoed across the empty facility. Inside, there wasn't any furniture. No family keepsakes. No holiday decorations. Only rows of perfectly organized archive boxes. Every box carried the same neat handwriting. Ethan Bennett. Another box. Insurance. Another. Medical records. Another. Financial transfers. My stomach tightened. This wasn't storage. It was an archive. Someone had spent years organizing every piece of a very dangerous puzzle. Ethan pointed toward a steel filing cabinet standing against the back wall. That's what she always opened. The top drawer wasn't locked. Inside were dozens of folders arranged by date. The very first folder contained copies of Ethan's medical reports. At first glance, everything appeared perfectly ordinary. Then I noticed something. 2 reports carried the exact same examination date. Same patient, same hospital, same specialist, but completely different conclusions. The first report, visual prognosis remains guarded. Continued recovery possible with long-term rehabilitation. The second, permanent bilateral optic nerve failure. No meaningful visual recovery expected. I read both reports 3 times. The signatures looked identical. The letterhead matched perfectly. Only the conclusions were different. What the hell? My voice barely escaped my throat. Ethan swallowed hard. I found those names in Olivia's emails. I continued searching the drawer. Another folder. Bank statements. Wire transfers. Payments made every month to a private consulting company I'd never heard of. Another folder. Insurance correspondence. Benefit approvals. Disability renewals. Everything depended on one condition. Ethan remaining permanently blind. Then I opened the last folder. A single envelope slipped onto the concrete floor. Across the front, written in Olivia's handwriting, were 5 words that made my blood run cold. Open after Ethan's death. Neither of us reached for the envelope. For several long seconds, we simply stared at it. Because deep inside, both of us had just realized something far worse than insurance fraud. Someone wasn't just making money from my son's blindness. Someone was already making plans for what would happen after he died. Neither of us touched the envelope. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing inside that tiny storage unit. My hands had examined murder weapons, blood-soaked clothing, and handwritten confessions during 35 years as a homicide detective. Yet somehow, this ordinary white envelope frightened me more than any crime scene I had ever walked into. Ethan finally broke the silence. Open it. I looked at him. If we open it, there's no going back. He held my gaze. I don't think there ever was. I carefully tore the envelope open. Inside were 6 documents. The first was a notarized copy of Ethan's last will and testament. Except, it wasn't the version I remembered signing as a witness 4 years earlier. Everything had changed. The entire estate, including our family home, retirement investments, and every remaining insurance benefit, would transfer directly to Olivia. My name wasn't mentioned once. Neither was Ethan's younger sister. Every safeguard our family attorney had originally written into the estate plan had disappeared. What is this? I whispered. Ethan leaned closer. I never signed that. I looked at the signature. It certainly looked like Ethan's. But after decades investigating forged financial documents, I immediately noticed tiny inconsistencies. The pressure changed halfway through the signature. Several letters leaned at impossible angles. Someone had practiced this signature many times, then finally got close enough. The second document was even worse. It authorized Olivia to make all future medical decisions without consulting any other family member. Effective immediately. Signed. By Ethan. Again. Another perfect forgery. I felt something inside me harden. This wasn't desperation. This was planning. Years of planning. I continued reading. The third folder contained invoices from a private laboratory. Monthly payments. Large monthly payments. Every invoice listed the same recipient. Dr. Victor Langford. The very same doctor whose name Ethan had seen in Olivia's email. Each payment was labeled as a consulting fee. But no legitimate consultant earned nearly $50,000 every month for 3 straight years. There had to be another explanation. Then I found it. Folded between 2 financial statements. A handwritten note. Olivia's handwriting was unmistakable. Continue current treatment until policy matures. No unexpected recovery. Unexpected recovery. Not visual recovery. Unexpected recovery. As if Ethan getting better would be considered a financial problem. I slowly lowered the paper. I think I know what this is. Ethan stared at me. What? It's not just insurance fraud. It's medical fraud. Financial fraud. Forgery. Possibly attempted murder. The last 2 words hung heavily between us. Neither of us wanted to say them, because saying them made everything real. I searched the remaining folders even more carefully. Near the bottom of the cabinet sat a thin black notebook. No label. No dates. Just plain black leather. When I opened it, I realized it wasn't a diary. It was a schedule. Every page listed dates. Medication changes. Doctor appointments. Insurance renewals. Bank deposits. Every major event from the last 3 years had been carefully recorded. Almost like someone managing a business. Then one page caught my attention. Next Friday. Medical review. Final documentation. Policy activation. Transfer remaining assets. Below those words. Only 4 more. No further delays. I looked at today's date. Wednesday. My stomach dropped. She's not gone for 10 days. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? I pointed at the notebook. According to this, whatever she's planning happens next Friday. He counted silently. 9 days. I shook my head. No. 2. His face turned pale. She lied about the length of the trip. Exactly. Everything about the so-called business conference had been designed for one purpose. To make us believe we had plenty of time. When in reality, we had less than 48 hours. I closed the notebook. For the first time since entering the storage unit, I wasn't thinking like a frightened father. I was thinking like the detective I used to be. Someone had spent years building this operation. People like that didn't make careless mistakes. If Olivia had left these documents here, she believed no one would ever find them. That confidence would become our greatest advantage. I looked directly at my son. We're putting everything back exactly where we found it. He nodded immediately. And then, I slipped the notebook inside my jacket. We stop running. We start building a case. The drive home felt longer than the drive to the storage facility. Neither Ethan nor I spoke very much. The black notebook rested inside my jacket like it weighed 50 pounds. Every few minutes, I caught myself touching the inside pocket, making sure it was still there. By the time we pulled into the driveway, the afternoon sun was beginning to disappear. Behind the oak trees, everything looked exactly the way we had left it. The porch swing. The flower beds Olivia watered every evening. The little ceramic welcome sign she insisted on hanging beside the front door. If someone had driven past the house, they would have seen the picture of a peaceful family. Only Ethan and I knew our lives had just split into a before and an after. As soon as we stepped inside, I locked the front door. Then every window. Old habits. When you've spent decades investigating violent crimes, you learn one simple rule. The moment someone has something to lose, they become unpredictable. I spread every document across the dining room table. Insurance papers, bank transfers, forged signatures, copies of medical reports. The black notebook. I studied each page again. Patterns always mattered. Killers had patterns. Fraudsters had patterns. People who believed they were smarter than everyone else always repeated themselves. After nearly an hour, one detail finally caught my attention. Every payment to Dr. Victor Langford arrived exactly 3 days after Ethan's monthly medical evaluation. Not 2, not 4, always 3. I circled every matching date. There. Ethan leaned over the table. What is it? They're following a schedule. He frowned. I don't understand. They aren't improvising. I tapped the notebook. Everything has a sequence. Medical appointment. Updated report. Insurance. Confirmation. Wire transfer. They've been running this operation like a business. Ethan slowly nodded. So if the pattern stays the same. I finished the thought. The next payment happens after your next evaluation. Silence filled the room. We both looked at the calendar hanging beside the refrigerator. Friday. Only 2 days away. Ethan lowered himself into a chair. She'll be back tomorrow night. I nodded. And according to the notebook, something important happens the day after that. He swallowed hard. What if we're already too late? I looked directly at him. No. If she thought everything was finished, there'd be no reason to schedule another evaluation. I opened the notebook again. Near the bottom of the page, someone had written a single word inside a small circle. Confirmation. That word bothered me. Confirmation of what? I kept reading. Then I found another note written beneath it. Patient must remain clinically consistent. Clinically consistent. Those words echoed inside my head. Then suddenly, everything clicked. I looked at Ethan. Your eyesight. What about it? If she discovers you've recovered. His face turned pale. The entire fraud falls apart. Exactly. Every forged report. Every insurance payment. Every fake diagnosis. Everything depended on Ethan remaining blind. Which meant, the moment Olivia walked through that front door, Ethan had to pretend he still couldn't see. For several seconds, he simply stared at me. Then he quietly nodded. I can do that. It won't be easy. I know. You can't look at her. I won't. You can't react if something moves. I understand. You have to convince her nothing has changed. He took a deep breath. I've been pretending to be blind for almost 2 weeks already. That answer stopped me cold. 2 weeks. My own son had been living with restored vision for nearly 14 days. Eating meals. Walking through the house at night. Watching Olivia every single day. Without telling a soul. I suddenly realized just how terrified he must have been. He hadn't stayed silent because he lacked courage. He stayed silent because he didn't know who he could trust. I reached across the table and rested my hand on his shoulder. You won't be alone anymore. His eyes began to fill with tears. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw something return to my son's face that had been missing for years. Hope. That evening, after Ethan went upstairs, I carried the documents into my old workshop. Behind the house, hidden inside an aging metal toolbox, was something I hadn't touched since retirement. My investigative camera kit. 2 miniature high-definition cameras. A digital audio recorder. Extra batteries. Memory cards. Technology had changed over the years. But evidence never had. Evidence didn't care about opinions. Evidence didn't lie. I carefully placed every device on the workbench. Tomorrow, Olivia would come home believing she was still controlling every move inside. This house. She had no idea. For the first time in 3 years, someone else was watching. The next morning began with a silence that felt almost unnatural. For the first time in 3 years, Olivia wasn't in the kitchen before sunrise. No coffee brewing. No cabinet doors opening. No gentle reminders about Ethan's medication. Only the sound of birds outside the dining room window. I woke before Ethan. There was work to do. Inside my workshop, I finished preparing the cameras. One went inside the kitchen cabinet above the coffee maker, hidden behind a row of unused serving bowls. It had a perfect view of the countertop where Olivia prepared every one of Ethan's medications. The second camera disappeared inside an old smoke detector housing in the hallway. From there, it captured the front door, the living room, and anyone walking toward Ethan's bedroom. The audio recorder took longer. I mounted it beneath the dining table, close enough to capture quiet conversations, but impossible to notice unless someone crawled underneath. Every device uploaded directly to a secure cloud account using a portable hotspot. If anything happened, the evidence would survive. By 9 o'clock, everything was ready. Ethan walked into the kitchen wearing dark sunglasses, white cane in one hand. His movements were slow, careful, exactly the way Olivia expected. He smiled weakly. How do I look? I forced myself not to answer immediately. Instead, I watched him. His eyes never drifted toward mine. His cane lightly tapped every doorway. Even knowing he could see, I almost believed he couldn't. You've gotten very good at this. He looked down. I had to. The sadness in those 3 words hit harder than I expected. Nobody should ever become an expert at pretending to be broken. Just after lunch, my phone vibrated. An unknown number. I answered. A calm male voice spoke first. Mr. Bennett. Yes. My name is Daniel Brooks. I'm the attorney who drafted your family's original estate documents 4 years ago. I immediately recognized the name. What can I do for you? I've been trying to reach Ethan for 2 days. My grip tightened around the phone. Why? There was a brief pause. I received a request to prepare amended documents transferring several family assets. My pulse quickened. The signatures looked unusual. Unusual how? I've worked with Ethan's signature many times. This one didn't feel authentic. I glanced toward Ethan. He was listening carefully. I refused to notarize the documents. Brooks lowered his voice. About an hour ago, someone withdrew the request. A cold chill crawled up my spine. Who? I believe it was your daughter-in-law. The line went silent. Then the attorney said something I would never forget. Mr. Bennett, be careful. I don't believe this is just about paperwork anymore. The call ended. I slowly lowered the phone. Ethan didn't ask what happened. He already knew by the expression on my face. She knows something. I nodded. Maybe not everything, but enough to become nervous. The afternoon passed painfully slowly. Every passing car made us look toward the front window. Every notification on my phone made my heart jump. Then, at exactly 6:43, a silver SUV turned into our driveway. Olivia was home. She climbed out smiling, pulling the same cream-colored suitcase she had taken the morning before. Anyone watching from across the street would have seen the perfect wife returning from an ordinary business trip. She stepped through the front door. Oh, I missed my boys. Her voice sounded warm, comforting, completely believable. She hugged me first, then walked directly toward Ethan. I noticed something immediately. She didn't ask how he was feeling. She didn't ask whether he'd eaten. She didn't ask about his day. Instead, her eyes went straight to the medicine cabinet. Just for a fraction of a second. But I saw it. The medication. That was the first thing she cared about. Ethan remained perfectly still. His eyes stayed unfocused behind the dark lenses. Olivia knelt beside him, kissed his forehead, and gently brushed her fingers across his cheek. I missed you so much, sweetheart. He smiled faintly. I missed you too. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have believed every second of that performance. She unpacked her suitcase before dinner. Most of it looked ordinary. Business clothes, shoes, cosmetics, conference brochures. Then, while she thought neither of us was watching, she removed a small black, insulated pouch from the bottom compartment. Instead of placing it in the refrigerator, she quietly carried it upstairs. My detective instincts immediately came alive. That pouch hadn't been packed for a business conference. It had been packed for something else. And whatever was inside it, she hadn't trusted leaving it behind. That night, neither Ethan nor I slept very much. Every sound inside the house seemed louder than usual. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of old floorboards, even the wind brushing against the oak branches outside, sounded like footsteps. At a little after 1 in the morning, I quietly opened my bedroom door. The hallway was dark, exactly the way I wanted it. The tiny camera hidden inside the smoke detector was already recording every movement, every sound. I slipped one earbud into my right ear and opened the live audio feed on my phone. Nothing. For almost 20 minutes. Nothing happened. Then, a bedroom door opened. Soft footsteps. Olivia. She wasn't walking toward the kitchen. She was walking toward Ethan's room. I held my breath. The bedroom door opened just enough for her to slip inside. For several seconds, I heard nothing. Then her voice, barely above a whisper. My poor sweetheart. You've suffered long enough. I felt every muscle in my body tighten. There was a faint rustling sound. Plastic, then metal. The unmistakable click of a medical case opening. The same black insulated pouch I had seen earlier. Another sound followed. A syringe. I had heard that sound countless times while investigating illegal drug cases. The protective cap twisting free. My heart started pounding. Olivia spoke again. This will finally make everything easier. Ethan answered exactly as we had practiced. I'm tired. I know. You won't have to struggle much longer. Tears burned behind my eyes. She wasn't talking about helping him recover. She was talking about ending something. Very gently, very calmly, as if she had rehearsed those words 100 times. Then came another sound. The rolling tray beside Ethan's bed. The clink of glass. A vial. I looked at the live camera feed from the kitchen. Empty. The hallway. Empty. Everything was happening inside the bedroom. Just outside the camera's view. I reached for my phone. One button. That was all it would take. The message had already been prepared. Now, my thumb hovered over the screen. Not yet. The investigators had told me they needed to see intent. To recover the substance. To catch her before she could destroy the evidence. Every second felt like an hour. Then Ethan spoke. So this is the new medicine. Yes. Will it help my eyes? There was the briefest pause. Then Olivia answered. No. It'll help you rest. That single sentence was all I needed. I pressed the button. Message sent. Less than 15 seconds later. Headlights flooded the front windows. Another 5 seconds. Car doors slammed. Then, the front door exploded inward. Federal agents. Don't move. The house erupted into controlled chaos. Heavy boots thundered across the hardwood floor. Flashlights swept through the hallway. Commands echoed from every direction. I ran toward Ethan's bedroom. 2 agents already had Olivia pinned against the wall. The syringe lay on the floor beside the bed. One gloved investigator carefully placed it inside an evidence bag. Another photographed the open medical pouch. Olivia wasn't screaming. She wasn't crying. She was staring directly at Ethan. For the first time, he removed his sunglasses. Slowly, deliberately. Then he looked straight into her eyes. I can see you. The color drained from Olivia's face. She stumbled backward. That's impossible. No. Ethan's voice remained steady. The only impossible thing is believing I trusted you for 3 years. She turned toward me. For just a moment, the caring wife disappeared. The warm smile vanished. What remained was something cold, calculating, and completely unfamiliar. You ruined everything. I shook my head. No, you did. Special Agent Melissa Carter stepped into the room, holding a folder. We have the financial records. She nodded toward another agent. We have the forged medical reports. Another evidence bag was lifted. And now, she looked directly at the syringe. We have attempted murder. Olivia closed her eyes. For the first time since I'd met her, she had absolutely nothing left to say. As agents led her through the hallway in handcuffs, she never looked back at me. She never looked back at the house. She only looked at Ethan, as though she couldn't understand how the man she had spent 3 years convincing the world was blind had been the one watching her all along. When the front door finally closed behind the last patrol car, silence returned to the house. I looked at my son. No sunglasses. No white cane. No pretending. Only Ethan, standing beside his bed, looking directly at me. For the first time in 3 years. He smiled. And this time, he smiled because he could actually see my face. People often believe justice arrives the moment someone is placed in handcuffs. The truth is, that's only where justice begins. The morning after Olivia's arrest, our house felt strangely unfamiliar. Not because anything had changed, but because something had finally disappeared. Fear. For 3 years. Every conversation, every meal, every doctor's appointment had revolved around one person. Now she was gone. Federal investigators remained inside the house for nearly 8 hours. They photographed every prescription, collected every bottle of eye drops, removed computers, cell phones, financial records, even the black insulated pouch that had carried the syringe. By that afternoon, search warrants had already been executed at Dr. Victor Langford's private clinic in Atlanta. His medical license was suspended before sunset. 3 additional physicians, 2 insurance adjusters, and a laboratory technician were taken into custody during the following week. The investigators later told me they had spent almost 2 years chasing pieces of the same criminal network: false diagnoses, forged medical records, fraudulent disability claims, patients whose recoveries had been deliberately delayed, sometimes for money, sometimes for something far worse. What they never had, until that night, was someone willing to fight back from inside. Ethan became that person. Every document we found, every recording, every hidden camera, every single piece of evidence fit together like the final pages of a puzzle that had taken years to complete. 16 months later, Olivia stood before a federal judge. She never looked at Ethan. She never looked at me. The woman who once smiled so effortlessly, thanked nurses, and called my son sweetheart, sat completely expressionless as the judge read every charge aloud. Wire fraud, medical fraud, forgery, conspiracy, attempted murder. When the sentence was finally announced, she simply closed her eyes. 34 years in federal prison. No tears, no apology, no explanation, just silence. I thought I would feel victorious. I didn't. I felt tired, because no prison sentence, no matter how long, could ever return the 3 years my son had lost. Recovery wasn't immediate. The muscles around Ethan's eyes had weakened from years of artificial damage. His brain had to relearn how to process depth, color, distance. Bright sunlight hurt him for months, but every single week, he saw a little more. One afternoon, almost 6 months after the trial, I found him standing alone on the back porch. He wasn't saying anything. He was simply watching the sun disappear behind the trees. I walked beside him. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, he smiled. I forgot sunsets had this many colors. I looked at the sky. Orange, gold, deep shades of purple. I'd seen thousands of sunsets during my lifetime, but somehow, that one felt like the first. A year later, Ethan returned to work, not in the laboratory where everything began. He chose something different. He accepted a position with a nonprofit organization that helped people recovering from traumatic vision loss. He told me he wanted to become the person he had needed 3 years earlier, someone who offered hope instead of fear. As for me, I retired from being a detective many years ago, but this case taught me something no homicide investigation ever had. The most dangerous criminals don't always carry weapons. Sometimes, they carry prescriptions. Sometimes, they wear white coats. Sometimes, they smile across your dinner table and convince the entire world they're the hero of the story. If something feels wrong, don't ignore it just because everyone around you says everything is fine. Ask questions. Read every document. Trust evidence more than appearances. And never let someone's title, education, or kindness silence your instincts. Because evil rarely announces itself with shouting. More often, it arrives quietly, patiently, smiling. If this story stayed with you, I'd like to ask you one question. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted wasn't the person you believed they were? Tell me your story in the comments. And tell me where you're watching from tonight. Until next time, take care of the people you love. And never stop looking for the truth, even when everyone else insists there is nothing left to see.